Hi, everyone. Welcome or welcome back. Today, I want to talk about something that I feel like doesn't get discussed enough, and that is the trauma of being in a toxic job. So, I'm going to talk about how my toxic job slowly broke me, and the moment that I realized that enough was enough, and really the aftermath that I'm still navigating as I'm trying to find a new job. And if you're new here, I'm really glad that you found this channel. This channel is for my fellow recovering people pleasers. I use real moments from my day to day life to reflect on what worked, what didn't, and what I am learning as I deconstruct fawning and try to live more authentically. If you watched one of my previous videos where I talked about quitting my bookseller job, you might remember that I briefly mentioned leaving a much more toxic job right before that. And today I actually want to talk about that toxic job. And I'm sharing this not necessarily to vent, but because I know how easy it is to normalize environments that slowly chip away at you, especially if you're a high performer or a recovering people pleaser. And if you've ever wondered whether it's you or the job, this video is for you. I was at this particular job for about a year and a half. And honestly, the first year and really the onboarding, everything was fine. It started out good. I liked my coworkers. It was a corporate environment. So, yes, it was, stressful. That's kind of the nature of a corporate environment. But when I got onboarded, we had a team of around 9 people, and we mostly got along. Everybody worked well together, at least I thought. And from the outside, it probably looked pretty healthy. Our team had bi weekly team meetings, and some of those weeks we even did kind of fun team building activities. Those things aren't really my thing. I don't particularly enjoy them, but everybody was nice enough. And like I said, we all got along. But probably, I want to say 6 months into it, things started to shift. So, two coworkers quit within a very short amount of time. I think it was like the same week, two coworkers had quit. And at first, I chalked this up to people were just moving on. I knew that the company had stalled in terms of promotions and growth. And so it made sense why people were looking for other jobs. But looking back, I realized those were really like the first red flags of what was going on. At the time, I didn't really see them as anything problematic, but now I can see very clearly what they were. And I feel like as people pleasers, a lot of times we'll either miss red flags or we just chalk it up to something else happening. One of the people that ended up quitting, or at least leaving, was a project director. And when she quit, obviously her work didn't disappear. It landed on me. So for months, I was essentially running major projects with really no oversight. I was doing work well above my role without any additional pay, without a title change, and really without much support. I feel like if you've worked in corporate, you know how this goes. This tends to happen all of the time. People are wearing multiple hats and not getting paid for the additional work that they're doing. And they tend to do it well. It just isn't compensated. And they're never going to frame it as exploitation. And I got this too. It's framed as things like, oh, you're so capable or you're doing such a good job. And I remember even my manager at the time saying, well, I guess I should have checked on you, but it really just seemed like you had everything handled. So I didn't really need to. And I thought that was a compliment at the time, but looking back, that was really like a big warning sign. Having increased responsibility without any increased authority or compensation. And I didn't know it yet, but that pattern was never going to correct itself. It was actually just going to get worse. So eventually, leadership, after probably 4 or 5 months after my two coworkers quit, they had a meeting with me and told me that they wanted to promote me. They were planning on promoting me, but they said that corporate was blocking it. They weren't opening up any additional positions, even though two people had left. And my manager and leadership said that they were fighting for me. They were really pushing to open up these positions. And the vice president of our group, she even said things like, we should have put you in this role a long time ago. And she would give me compliments like the report that you just wrote, that was one of the best reports that we've ever had, and the client really liked it. So it was a lot of validation. And really, I mean, to be honest, it felt very intoxicating. It felt great to do a good job. But months continued to pass. Really like 6, 7, maybe even 8 months of me doing project director related work, again, with no title, no raise. just continued responsibility. And every time that I would ask for an update, I was told just be patient. Like these things move slow. And then after that, things escalated. I was assigned a new project and I was told this is going to be a test run, basically, to see if you can handle being a project director. And mind you, again, I was doing project director related activities, just not getting paid for it. And it was confusing because they had already implied and straight up told me that we want you to be promoted and you're going to get this new position whenever it opens up. But looking back, I don't think they ever really planned on giving it to me. And I had to work more closely with upper management, and it became quite unbearable, actually, very unbearable. The rules, they constantly changed. I would be told to do something and then criticized for doing exactly that. I was blamed for mistakes that were not mine. I was compared to other people. Oh, she's doing more work than you. I was undermined, told that, I needed to stop doing things where, as before, I was just doing them naturally. And I noticed a big shift in my sleeping patterns. I really did not get enough sleep. I was very anxious. I was getting maybe like 3 to 4 hours a night and waking up with a lot of dread for the entire day. And then finally, I was told I wasn't being a team player. I remember specifically when all of this went down, it was my birthday and I was sick. I probably was sick because of burnout. I know that it contributed to me being physically ill. And so I asked to take a sick day. And for management responded with sarcasm, with pressure. They made some kind of comment about I'm going to have to cancel my birthday lunch. And then they sent an email after I got back into the office, basically giving me a list of tasks to do. Some, again, which were not my responsibility. And I finally pushed back on a task, again, that wasn't my job. I didn't say I wouldn't do anything. I just said that I needed assistance. And when I did that, I was punished. They stripped me of my responsibilities that I had already been doing for months on end. And I was told that I had to route all of the client communications through upper management. And I knew that was just a way for them to exert control. And I had reached my breaking point at this time. I was crying multiple times a week. My anxiety was at an all-time high. My body was screaming at me that I needed to get out of there. And so finally, I quit. And yes, there was relief, but there was also a lot of grief because I actually enjoyed my work. And for that first maybe 6 months to a year, it was actually okay. I enjoyed my work and I liked my coworkers, but I couldn't survive that environment. And then after I left, probably 5 or 6 months later, I found out that another coworker had quit around the same time. So I wasn't the only one going through it. Basically, our team had gone from 9 people to just 4 people in about 7 months. And the vice president, the one that was causing all of the problems, she eventually got fired, which I was very surprised about. But really, that was very validating and it told me everything that I needed to know. So here's what I've learned working in a toxic job, especially as a recovering people pleaser. Being a yes person doesn't protect you. You're only going to get more work and you're only going to become more miserable. The goalpost is always going to move. You might be successful in one thing, but then there's always going to be the next thing. And productivity is not the same thing as value. You could have somebody on the team doing 4 people's jobs. They're productive, they get things done, but that doesn't mean that they're valued at the company. And I am proud of myself that I kept asking about the promotion and I put pressure on them. And I am proud of myself that I actually said no to something that was not within my job description. Even though things did get worse, I started seeing my worth. And then once it was clear that I was not valuable there and they were taking advantage of me, I ran as fast as I could. So, if I could go back, what were maybe some of the warning signs or things that I should have watched out for in a toxic job or a manager, especially as, a recovering people pleaser that likes to see the good in things and thinks that hard work will get you a promotion or will be worth it. So, these are some of the signs that showed up early and some that became clearer later, but all of them mattered. So, the first one was praise without any sort of change is a trap. So again, I was told that I was exceptional, that I was doing great work. I was told my work was actually some of the best that they had seen in the group. And they said things like, we should have promoted you a long time ago. And for a while, yeah, that felt good. It felt like proof. But again, none of that came with any authority, any pay, or any protection. It just gave me more and more work. And it wasn't work that I particularly enjoyed either, I should say. So I learned that if praise isn't paired with real change, it's not recognition. It's just a way for them to delay everything. And us recovering people pleasers, we're really good at understanding systems. We understand, yes, change takes time. We understand there's chains of approval. We know that things don't happen overnight. We give the benefit of the doubt and we wait and we stay patient and we do what we're told and we take on more work in the meantime, telling ourselves, hey, this is going to pay off eventually. And that's exactly why those tactics work on us because we're motivated by things like good work ethic or persistence, intelligence. We're motivated to learn because we like learning. We just don't want to do the job well. We want to understand it. But I had to learn this the hard way that a job is not a learning opportunity, it's a contract. And when one side keeps changing the terms of that contract is broken. And one way that companies, and this happened to me, one way that they keep you from realizing that is they'll put a vague job description. So they'll put things like any additional tasks as assigned. And that's what happened to me. I realized that I couldn't even find a clear official description of my role. And it just kept shifting. So they would change the job description, and they weren't changing it to make it clearer or for transparency reasons. They were changing it so that they could ask for more without paying me more. And then once I saw that, I couldn't unsee it. It was obvious. The second thing is it's never their fault. Whoever's in leadership, it's never their fault. One of the earliest red flags that I noticed, and again, I kept brushing it off, I saw that management never took accountability for any mistakes. If something went wrong, it was never their fault. It was maybe the lack of resources. Maybe it was IT. Maybe it was corporate, just we don't have enough money. Somebody else that didn't follow up or drop the ball. And eventually that someone else became me. I eventually realized that managers who avoid accountability, they're very good at choosing scapegoats. And as recovering people pleasers, we're the perfect candidates to be that scapegoat. And that's because our instinct is to internalize criticism. We assume that we must have missed something. We take responsibility even when it doesn't belong to us. That happened to me. I was blamed for not flagging a minor issue in a report, even though I had flagged it in the track changes section. But I wasn't even included in emails when the report was sent out. But what happened when things went well? Well, management, they took the credit. They might not have overtly took the credit, but they took it through subtle language, saying things like, well, I mentored her or I oversaw the work. Even when they only just looked over the final product and I was doing the work and the writing and the interviewing and all of the above, still they took the credit because they oversaw the whole project. And that's the pattern. If somebody only admits mistakes when there's no consequences and then takes credit when there are rewards, that's not leading. They're rewriting the narrative to make themselves look good. And that's not a safe place to work. And I think with a lot of this, what really makes all of this so confusing is that it's really subtle. Nobody is yelling, usually, sometimes, but in a lot of these toxic environments, no one's yelling. They're being polite, professional, and quietly destabilizing. So once I started questioning myself instead of them, I ended up carrying the problems for them. And that's exactly what they wanted. The third thing that I noticed that I should have paid attention to was they were really good at eroding my self confidence, or at least trying to. Honestly, the hardest part of being in a toxic job, it's not necessarily the long hours or the lack of credit or even being lied to. Yes, those things suck, but I think the worst thing is that it erodes your self confidence because that's the part that follows you long after you leave. It's really hard to get that self-confidence back after it's been torn down. And toxic managers, they're really good at gaslighting. They make sure that nothing important is documented. So, for example, conversations about any promotions, any promises that they make, any next steps, none of that is documented. So then later, when you bring it up, it's easy for them to say, well, that was a misunderstanding or a miscommunication, or that wasn't my intent. You took it the wrong way. But in my case, I know it wasn't a misunderstanding. There were multiple conversations about my promotion. One where, my manager even said that she would refuse new work if we didn't get these positions opened and approved. And at first, she acted like she was advocating for me, like we were on the same team and that I needed to get this promotion. But then when it came time to finally follow through, suddenly those conversations never happened, or she didn't mean it that way. So it's no longer then about their inconsistency. It's now about your memory, your interpretation, your perception. And that's the whole point. They don't want to admit that they overpromised or that they dangled a promotion to get unpaid labor. So instead, they make you doubt yourself. They'll use buzzwords that they cut really deep for recovering people pleasers. Things like you're not a team player, you're not collaborating well. And those words, they hurt us because many of us were conditioned to see our worth as being helpful and agreeable. And they might also pathologize your reaction. They might say things like, "Oh, you seem really overwhelmed," or, maybe this role just isn't the right fit for you. So now the problem isn't the workload, the problem is you. And once you start naming the real issues, their language shifts. It goes from talking about the work to then talking about you. And that's when you know something's wrong. So looking back, I wish that I had trusted the red flags. Honestly, during my interview with the hiring manager, something about her felt off, but I dismissed it as she's just an eccentric personality. And I also wish that I would have documented everything because gaslighting erodes your sense of reality in a way that's hard to explain unless you've lived through it. Even if nobody else cared, I would have proof for myself as to what really happened. So at some point, it's important to recognize when it's time to make an escape plan. And that doesn't mean just quitting on the spot like I did. It means noticing when you've hit a point of no return, when that job, it's not just hard, but it's harming you. That's the moment that maybe you should start applying to other jobs, or maybe you should start doing the bare minimum wherever you can. And especially where maybe you need to emotionally disconnect, maybe to stop letting a job define who you are. I wish I had done that sooner. Going from really having a job to no job, it's been hard. And looking back, I wish I had at least been casually exploring other options when that first coworker had left. Instead, I talked myself into staying. The benefits were good. Management wasn't that bad. I told myself things would pass, that I would get a promotion. And it's easy to laugh about how toxic a job is or to kind of make fun or poke fun at corporate. But I realized that for me, laughing about it or making jokes about it, that was just a coping mechanism. It made the situation feel lighter than it actually was. Joking about it convinced me that I didn't actually have to do anything about it. That was just, how things were, especially in a corporate environment, that trying to leave wouldn't change anything. But I realized that it would have. I realized that the corporate life is not for me. The performance, the shape shifting, that corporate voice that makes me shiver when I think about it. I don't need to sound like a robot to be competent. I can lead without erasing myself. And I refuse to be somebody else for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. It's exhausting. And I like myself too much for that now. So if you're comfortable, I'd really love to hear from you. So, how did you know when it was time to leave a toxic job? And what lessons did you carry forward? And if this resonated, you can like or subscribe for more reflections on boundaries and recovering from people pleasing. And thank you so much for being here and taking this journey with me. We will continue deconstructing people pleasing one moment at a time.